Debbie Reynolds, welcome to Hard Talk. Why are you still so driven to carry on performing?
Well, now, if I wasn't having a wonderful time, I'd be bored to death and I'd be sitting at home and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I've always been busy, active, and home at a meeting in the States. I travel 42 weeks a year, and that's just constant. I've never stopped working since I'm 16. It's just like used to it. I think I get really nervous after, if let's say I had 2-week vacation, then I'm very nervous. I have to get busy.
When you first started though, at the age of 16, could you have imagined you'd still be doing it at the age of 78?
No, I thought most people were dead. But that's why they named the tour Alive.
Alive and Fabulous. Yeah.
Alive and Fabulous.
That's your tour.
Well, when they called me and they said, Debbie, what should we name the tour? I said, I don't really know. But most people, sometimes they say, Debbie Reynolds, is she still alive? So then they went with that and they said, well, we're going to call the tour Alive and Fabulous. They added Fabulous. And when people come and see me, they'll see, I am.
You say you're very driven, but it's more than that, isn't it? You have to do this financially too. It's not been an easy life for you financially.
Well, it's not, when I say the word driven, it's what you want to do. Do I have to work? Yes, everybody has to work. And there's always bills. I raised 5 children. They all went to university, and they always had a mother that worked. So they had a lot of cars, colleges, you know. So I think that all parents work, don't they? Well, especially if they have a divorce. You see,
well, that's the thing, isn't it? Your third husband, Richard Hamlet, he left you bankrupt, didn't he?
My second husband left me bankrupt.
And the third one.
And the third husband, he didn't leave me bankrupt. He just left with all the money.
That must be very difficult because as a Hollywood star, you had amassed a huge amount of money until your second and third marriage.
I know, but husbands spend a lot of money. I could shop all day on what they spend.
Do you regret that you trusted your husband so much financially and in the end it just didn't work out, that for one reason or another? In the case of your second husband, he gambled a lot, I think, didn't he? In the case of your third husband, there was a hotel complex investment that didn't work out.
As a woman, I have to answer you really honestly that when you fall in love, you don't really ask, is the man in love with me? You really think that he is. Otherwise, you wouldn't get married. You just really do believe. I'm rather Victorian, and I think that if the man says, I love you, Debbie, and I want to marry you and be with you the rest of my life, you must believe him or you wouldn't marry him. I mean, I'm not a complete fool until after the fact, but then I was. Yes, I've been married 3 times. Twice, the second one went bankrupt, and the third one went bankrupt, but he didn't get everything. I mean, he took all the money and ran, but he didn't get everything. And I have great resilience, you know. They don't tackle me on the way out. They just leave me fallen like a good punch.
Back in 1988, though, it all looked very different, isn't it? You were quoted in an interview saying, 2 more years and I'll have enough money to retire. That was prior to the marriage crumbling and leaving you pretty penniless.
I always think that you can make it back. And I give myself, not really a 2-year period, a 5-year plan. I always say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, so I can get through. Because if there's a tunnel, there's a light. I can make it. I never give up.
What did bankruptcy mean for you, though? How did it affect you?
It means the government gets all the money. What does bankruptcy mean to me? Bankruptcy is a very big setback, but you didn't do it. You know, your husband does it. And in California, it's California taxes, community property. So the government steps in and you have to pay back what your husband owes.
Some people say, how could this happen? Because we always hear these stories of Hollywood stars and they have people to protect their business interests. You get the impression there's someone doing everything for them. But in this case, clearly not. There was no one out there protecting
No,
your
there's
business interests.
someone stupid around like me.
So you didn't get advice or...
Oh, I had great lawyers and they advised me to get always a promissory note, which I did. But that doesn't hold up in bankruptcy court. Somehow there's a different thing in community property. So they win.
And you're still working as a result of that.
You see, the good fortune that I had was to be in show business. And in show business because if people care about you and if you have a really good show and if you worked really hard your entire life and you've learned to sing and dance and do mimicry and just be good at your craft, people want to come and see you.
Cast your mind back to those early days when you were first discovered, at the age of 16. What did it feel like to be on the verge of a Hollywood career?
Well, who knew that? I was 16, I was in school. So I entered a local beauty contest just for fun because they gave away a free blouse and scarf. And we were really
That's
poor.
why you did it, because you thought you might win a free blouse and
Well,
scarf.
I mean, a scarf, you know, a silk scarf. I didn't have a silk scarf. I never had a silk scarf or a beautiful blouse.
Did you want to be an actress?
No one in my family was in show business, and I was just a kid, you know, going to school, and I wanted to be a gym teacher, and I was working really hard to go to college, and the way I could go is if I got a scholarship. So I had to keep my grades up, and that's what I wanted to do, and that's what I'd hoped to be. But and they had this local contest in Burbank, California, and I won the contest. There was a talent scout there, and then they took me to Warner Brothers, and they did a screen test, and they asked me why I wanted to be in the movies, and I said, I don't.
They must have been a bit surprised by that, because every young girl in those days wanted to be an actress.
I didn't want.
Especially in California.
I really had no thought about it. I love to go to movies, but why would you think you were going to be in the movies? I mean, it's one thing to go to the movies and see movie stars, but why would you think you were ever going to be in the movies if no one in your family, if you weren't exposed to it at all? I had no dream of that. So then they're all of a sudden, I guess they thought I was so crazy that I'd fit into show business. Because you have to be a little crazy to be in show business. I've decided that.
You came from a pretty poor background, didn't you?
Yes,
Not
my
an easy
family were
background.
very poor, meaning we had enough food on the table, but my father didn't make very much money, worked for the railroad, and so there was very little to go around. We didn't have furniture, we had a little home my daddy built, and I can't say that we knew we were poor because everybody else was poor, so there was no one to guide you to say, oh, don't you feel terrible? Or we didn't feel we were different than anybody else because everybody was poor.
You made some fantastic films. I mean, The Unsinkable, Molly Brown, How the West Was Won, and the one I suppose that always sticks in my mind, Singing in the Rain with Gene Kelly, a fantastic musical. Yeah. When you were making it at the time, did you think this is going to be a great film, this is going to be a film that people are going to remember for decades afterwards?
Well, no, I wouldn't know that because I was just a little girl. I was 17. When I made that picture, they put me in the picture. I never danced, and then Mr. Mayer, who was the head of the studio, said, Jean, this is Debbie Reynolds. My Mary Frances was my real name, so this is Debbie. They changed my name to Debbie, and they said, she's going to be your new leading lady, and then Jean said, really, do you dance? But I said, well, no, and he thought he was aghast, I'm sure.
And there's some very complicated dance scenes in that movie, aren't there?
I think as tough as you could get.
How did you tackle it then?
Well, he said, can you do the time step? So I said, yes, I can. So I did the time step. Then he said, can you do the maxi forward? And I said, I don't have a car. Because the time step, maxi forward, is a kind of a dance step. So then he knew he was dead. He knew he had to teach this little creature how to dance. So I did, and I worked like a dog. I had 5 different teachers, and at 6 months they prepared me to work, and I worked really, really hard because he's a taskmaster and a great dancer, and this was his idea. And Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire and Stanley Donen, they were the creators. Donald O'Connor could dance to drop dead. His family were all from circus, and he was great. He could run up the wall and run backwards.
You say he was a taskmaster. Some people say actually he was pretty tough on you during the making of that movie. Not always very nice to you.
No, he was tough. You got the right idea. But you have to.
Did he shout at you? He wanted you to work harder?
He had a microphone. He used to yell at me.
Gene Kelly had a microphone. He used to yell at you.
Well, as you're dancing, he would yell. He'd say, smile, bigger, louder. He'd always coach you.
Because you were his love interest in the movie, weren't you? And you fought off, I guess quite a few other actresses who were in the frame to get that role originally. People talked about maybe Judy Garland doing it, maybe Leslie Caron, but in the end, it was the unknown. It was Debbie Reynolds.
Well, I did suit the role. It was supposed to be an innocent, virginal little girl, and certainly I was that. But I think it was a tough deal for poor Gene to be stuck with me, who had never danced. It would have been far better for him to have a great dancer. But I worked so hard that I think in the end, when I look at that performance of that little girl, I think I did a good job.
Must have been a fantastic time in many ways, the 1950s, because there you were also hanging out with Frank Sinatra, the Rat Pack, this great partying mob, and there were you, as you say, you were the innocent little girl. That was your image. How did you fit in with the Rat Pack who were going off having these wild times?
Because I wasn't having a wild time when I first started. I was just 16, 17, 18. But then I did my first nightclub act, and I did a movie with Frank Sinatra called The Tender Trap. So he kind of adopted me like a little sister, and he's the one that advised me never marry a singer.
Which you did in the end. You married, your first husband was Eddie Fisher, probably one of the best known singers of that time. I mean, a massive star in the 1950s.
20 gold records. Well, why should I start out right?
Why didn't you listen to Frank Sinatra? Because that marriage ended in disaster in the end. Of course, Eddie Fisher ran off with Elizabeth Taylor.
But you see, I make all these mistakes. So I started out wrong the first time, then I did wrong the second time, then I did wrong the third time. Then I called myself out.
Your daughter, Carrie Fisher, said, I always thought your whole courtship, that's you and Eddie Fisher, was a sort of press release. That's what Carrie said. They were riding the wave of being a media couple more than having any real compatibility. She says you probably didn't have much in common with Eddie Fisher.
Well, probably, but I didn't know that. You know, I was in love, young love. What did I know about love? I really didn't know anything. I thought this was terrific. He was darling, he was handsome, he was a wonderful looking fellow and a star, and here I was a young star. So
quite a scandal, though, when he ran off with what was, I suppose, one of the world's best-known actresses at the time, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes, Elizabeth. Well, we went to school together at the MGM lot. We were good friends, and she was the most beautiful woman in the world. I certainly wasn't. And the most sexual woman in the world. I certainly wasn't.
Well, I think you said about all this, you could see why Eddie Fisher wanted her, but why would Elizabeth Taylor want Eddie Fisher? What do you mean by that? What was wrong with Eddie Fisher?
She wonders too now. But of course she found that out, you know, right afterwards. Well, I told Eddie, I said, you know what's going to happen is that in a year and a half, she's going to realize that you're really just nothing, and she's going to throw you out. So that's what happened. She did Cleopatra, she met Richard Burton, and he was out. Year and a half.
Public scrutiny, though, when that story broke, must have been unbearable. I think at one stage you said it's bad enough when a man walks out on you, but to have millions of people watching, the fact the public took it as an absolute affront to them, that was unbelievable. This was very much being played out in the public gaze, wasn't it?
Well, isn't everything in show business? Everything's out in the public eye. Carrie was talking to me one day. She said, "Mother is sort of like Brad and Angelina Jolie and Jennifer Aniston today. You and Eddie and Elizabeth, it was sort of the similar story." But I always make a joke of it. I say, "Well, Elizabeth went down the Nile."
Eddie Fisher has always challenged your version of the breakup, hasn't he? I mean, I think at one stage he said, "Debbie's never forgiven me for what happened. She knows I didn't leave her for Elizabeth. We were apart long before that, but that's not the role she played for the public."
Well, poor boy, I feel so sorry for him. He has to make up some story.
And in his book, he's even less generous about it. You say Debbie Reynolds was the girl next door, because that was your image, that's what he wrote, but only if you lived next door to a self-centered, totally driven, insecure, untruthful phony.
Well, the good thing is that we found out he could read.
Have you forgiven him? Doesn't sound like it from the comments that...
I kid around about it. Yes, I have forgiven Eddie. I've never really understood a man leaving his children. I can understand leaving the woman, but he never really came back and around to be a very good father. So I don't particularly admire that. I mean, I have wonderful children, and I'm their parents. So when you say, have I forgiven him, I say that with sort of a bit of anger, because I have a son, that is his only son, and he misses having a good dad. So when Eddie left, he really left.
Do you think Hollywood's changed a lot since those days? Life is still lived out in the public glare, but these days it's probably even more frenetic, isn't it? There are 24-hour entertainment channels. Almost you feel that celebrities are being watched absolutely round the clock.
Well, the world has changed so, hasn't it? I mean, when I came into films, the studios owned the release of the films, then Congress took that over in America, and then they could no longer release their films, so then television entered the scene, so that the film industry was cut in half, the earning power. So television then took over, and then movies, the golden era ended. Nobody that was any longer under contract. They dropped Clark Gable, then Greta Garbo, and everybody. All the great big stars were let go. I think I was the only one left under contract, and Leslie Caron and Pierre
Yes, you
Angeli.
spent 17 years, didn't you, under contract at the movie studios, and during that time, in those days, they told you, right, this week you're going to be in that film, next week you're going to be in that film. It was a very controlled life for an actress.
Yes.
That's not the way it is these days. Yeah.
No, I think it's much harder because now you have to buy your own product, buy your book, produce it yourself, raise the money. Much harder because we were really produced.
They were finding the movies for you, weren't they?
We were owned. We were under contract. But it was a wonderful life. We were very sheltered. We weren't paid nearly what they get today. They get $20 million a picture.
What do you think about that? When an actor or actress today gets $20 million for a film?
I think they should save their money.
Some people say the thing about the Hollywood system in the past, though, it produced some bad movies as well, because they needed to find movies for you to do. They said, all right, well, do this movie. And it wasn't always about quality.
Well, they're not all good today either, but I think that they made some very good pictures, and I think they make some good pictures today. I think they're very fortunate in the salaries that they make, and I wish for all of the stars great success, and I hope that they give a lot of their money to charity because they have a great opportunity to help people, and most of them are doing that, and I think I admire that very much. We made $700 a week. In the beginning, I made $65 a week. They make $20 million. There's a great deal of difference.
And one other difference, it seemed almost, they talk about the golden age of Hollywood in those days, but it was a very innocent time in some ways. I suppose that's why your breakup with Eddie Fisher was such a scandal that played out. But the films were more innocent too, weren't they? A lot of them were,
Yes.
were boy meets girl, they fall in love and they live happily ever after.
We had Donna Reed and Andy Griffith and, corny pictures, that were very homebody. And, well, I think there's too much violence and I think there's too much pornography. Really, I call it pornography. Today, the innocence is gone. I mean, I think that really a body can look beautiful through a veil. It doesn't have to be just boom. I don't really want to see a man's frontal or a woman. I think it's not appropriate for children or young people. If you want that kind of a movie, you can go and see it. But I really don't think it should be for the general public and in every film.
Do you think the audience has won that? Do you think Hollywood is dictating the product to the audiences, or the
I
audience
think
is
that
demanding that and Hollywood's giving them?
television has gone much too far. Television. I don't say that films have necessarily, but they have, but really television is pushing it because it's so popular and so much cable today. I mean, you have so many hundreds of programs, whereas before we didn't even have television. So first then you had two cables, 2 stations, 4 stations, and now it's really to fill that's like an octopus, to give the public what they want is very difficult for all the networks. The competition's unreal. The paparazzi are unreal. It's a relentless, a very fast world today. Hard to keep up with it. It would
That's
be
why
best
I wonder
if we don't.
whether today it would be very difficult to endure the sort of breakup you went through with Eddie Fisher, because if it was very public then, what would it be like today?
It would be awful. Well, you just watched it. You watch it with Angelina and Brad. They follow them everywhere. I feel very sorry for them, but I went through that. I had hundreds of press in my front lawn and in the backyard and the swimming pool and all around, and it is difficult, and it is not something that one likes to have happen. It won't happen to me again. I'm just going to be here and visit the UK and play the Apollo Theater. I'm just going to have a good time and be live on stage and do what I like to do. But my life can be easy now because I've been in the business 63 years, and I've had 63 wonderful, glorious years, and so I'm very happy with my life. I've been through all of it now, and I've done all of it, and I've had a great life and a great time, and I'm still having it. That's what I like.
And you always make very pithy comments. You're obviously a very direct sort of person, but you made some very pithy comments about why you stopped making films. You said, I stopped making movies because I don't like taking my clothes off. Maybe it's realism, but in my opinion, it's utter filth. Very direct about, as you were saying, what you think Hollywood is doing now.
I don't think it's glamorous. I don't think it's pretty. I don't think it's sexy. I think there's ways to make everything wonderful and exciting and interesting and mysterious at the same time. There's no need for it. Depends what one wishes in life. I just never wanted my career or my life to go that direction. I'm a religious person. I don't believe to go that way. I don't believe in that example for the young people. I think you can be a good entertainer and a good actress, and you don't have to. If you want to, go ahead. It's just not something that I ever wanted to do, and so therefore I never did it.
The clock's never going to be turned back, though, to that innocent age, though, in the 1950s and 60s.
I think not. I think this is it. We don't have to go. I don't really have a comment about it because we are here, and today is today, and so we have to face, but we can handle ourselves very well. We can handle ourselves with class and aplomb and dignity. We don't have to fall down amongst the masses, so to speak, meaning if you want to be trashy, you can be trashy, but there's really no need. It's much more fun to have a little dignity in life.
You've always been very open about the mistakes you made in your love life and about picking the wrong men. What about the mistakes you made professionally? I mean, at one stage in the late 60s, you had a row, early 70s with NBC, didn't you, over the Debbie Reynolds show, because you decided to make a stand over tobacco advertising. What happened there?
Well, everyone could smoke on camera and you could advertise cigarettes. Now, I didn't know that Congress was going to pass a law that you couldn't within 6 months. And I had a new show, the Debbie Reynolds show. It was like the Lucille Ball show and the Carol Burnett show. A 2-year contract set, a lot of money, and I was having a great time doing it. But then the show came out and they were advertising Salem cigarettes. And I got very upset because I said, I'm not advertising cigarettes or liquor. You promised me that I wasn't.
That was quite a stand to take at that particular period when almost everyone smoked.
Well, what everybody did, but you don't have to advertise it for the younger people. You don't have to do that. And I didn't have to do that. So I just told them I didn't want to have a cigarette sponsor. And they said, well, that's too bad. That's who you have. I said, but no, that's not my contract. So they read the contract, and that was the truth.
Your thinking was quite ahead of the game, though, because banning of cigarette advertising in most countries didn't happen for many years later.
About a year later. I lost millions for that stand, but I'm not proud of it. I mean, I'm happy I did it.
I think at one
I
stage
think it was
you
foolish.
described it as the most stupid mistake you've ever made, didn't you?
It was foolish for me, financially. But then my husband would have just had more money to spend.
One thing that's always got you through, and we've seen it over the past few minutes, is your sense of humour. How important do you think is that in show business? Because it's a rough and tumble life, isn't it, show business?
But in life, no, life is. It's not just show business. Life itself is hard and rough and tumble in whatever form. Doesn't matter whether you sell bicycles or whether you work in a toy store. Life isn't easy, but life is what we can make of it. And with a sense of humor, a belief, a faith in whatever faith, it doesn't matter. As long as we're good to other people and we're kind and we look around our lives and we do unto others, I think that we'll make it through.
Debbie Reynolds, thank you very much for appearing on HARDtalk.
Thank you very much, very much. Good to see you, good to see you.